What's going on? YouTube, listen up, young elder gang. This is Chief Whitebird at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes in this video. You will find history definitions, scripture information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning. The truth, keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, young elder gang, hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel, hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. The American Civil War was a conflict fought between the United States, the Union, and the Confederate States of America, the Confederacy, from 1861 to 1865. The war stemmed from deep-seated tensions over slavery, states' rights, and westward expansion. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 triggered secession from the Union by Southern states, ultimately leading to war. 11 Southern states seceded from the Union after Lincoln's election, forming the Confederacy. The Battle of Fort Sumter in April 1861 marked the beginning of hostilities. The war saw numerous major battles, including Gettysburg, Antietam, and Shiloh. President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, declaring the freedom of slaves in Confederate states. The Union ultimately won the war, with Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendering to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865. The Civil War led to the abolition of slavery through the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. The expansion of slavery into new territories and the debate over its morality were major issues. Southern states asserted their right to secede from the Union and to control their own affairs, particularly regarding slavery. The North's economy was based on industry and agriculture, while the South's economy relied heavily on agriculture and slave labor. His election as a Republican, opposed to the expansion of slavery, triggered secession. The war resulted in the deaths of over 620,000 Americans. The Civil War significantly altered American society, including the role of women, and the relationship between the federal government and the states. The period after the war, known as Reconstruction, aimed to rebuild the South and integrate former slaves into society, but faced significant challenges. In 1860 to 61, the Southern states, representatives of the original signatories of the Social Compact, walked out of Congress. This created sine die. Abraham Lincoln was elected president. I wonder, did they walk out because he was a dark-skinned brother? But anyway, the South walked out and declared their states' rights pursuant to the Social Compact known as the U.S. Constitution. Slavery was only window dressing for the Civil War. The war had nothing to do with slavery. It has to do with states, the right of the present living posterity of the original signatories to the Social Compact to alter or abolish the forms of government which their forefathers established for themselves and their posterity. Rights and the national debt to the creditor's fiscal agent, the bankers. The South wanted to be redeemed from the crown in England. The North wanted to remain under their dominion and their debt. When the posterity of the member states of the South ordered their representatives to walk out of Congress, this ended the public side of the bifurcated Constitution as far as the Republican form of government was concerned. What remained of the government was the private side, the democracy, the remaining mob of illegitimate members of the congressional body of agents who had breached the organic social compact known as the U.S. Constitution, which the beneficiaries of the original signatories of the trust so established for their posterity foisted upon them under the rule of the fiscal agents of the crown bankers. These conspired with local politicians to work against the best interests of the social compact known as the United States. Their carefully sown and nurtured propaganda developed into open rebellion and resulted in the secession of the people of the Compact Party state known as South Carolina on December 29, 1860. Within weeks, the people, beneficiaries as the posterity of the original signatories to the Social Compact, of 6 Compact Party states joined the conspiracy against the Union and broke away to form the new Social Compact construct known as the Confederate States of America, with Jefferson Davis as president. The plotters raided armies, seized forts, arsenals, mints, and other Union property. Even members of President Buchanan's cabinet conspired to destroy the Union by damaging the so-called public credit and working to bankrupt the Social Compact Union. President Buchanan claimed to deplore secession but took no steps to check it, even when a U.S. ship was fired upon by South Carolina shore batteries. Shortly thereafter, Abraham Lincoln became president, being inaugurated on March 4, 1861. Lincoln immediately ordered a blockade on southern ports to cut off supplies that were pouring in from Europe. The official date for the start of the Civil War is given as April 12, 1861, when Fort Sumter in South Carolina was bombarded by the Confederates, but it obviously began at a much earlier date. In December 1861, large numbers of European troops, British, French, and Spanish, poured into Mexico in defiance of the Monroe Doctrine. This, together with widespread European aid to the Confederacy, strongly indicated that the Crown was preparing to enter the war. The outlook for the North and the future of the Union was bleak indeed. In this hour of extreme crisis, it has been said by those who remain anonymous that President Abraham Lincoln appealed to the Crown's perennial enemy, Russia, for assistance. When the envelope allegedly containing Mr. Lincoln's urgent appeal was given to Tsar Alexander II, it has been postulated that he weighed it unopened in his hand and stated, "Before we open this paper or know its contents, we grant any request it may contain." It can also be reasonably proven that the representative Southern members of the several states of the Union, by virtue of their secession from the Union, also ceased to exist sine die, and that some state legislatures in the Northern Bloc also adjourned sine die, and thus all the states which were parties to creating the social compact contract known as the United States Constitution for the United States of America apparently ceased to exist. On April 15, 1861, so-called President, Mr. Abraham Lincoln executed an executive order as Commander-in-Chief, Lincoln Executive Proclamation 1, and it can also be reasonably proven that the United States of America has subsequently and temporarily ceased being the acknowledged law of the land in many courts. The assumed title of President, the assumed title of Congress, and the assumed jurisdiction of the courts thereof have unlawfully presumed that they were free to remake the Union in a new image under the so-called law of necessity, whereas, lawfully, no such constitutional provisions were or are in place which afforded power to any of the actions which were taken, which presumed to place the Union under the new form of control or designation as a democracy. Constitutional law under the original social compact for the several states of the Union is apparently enforced only as a matter of keeping the public peace under the provisions of General Orders No. 100 under martial law rule. This peace is further evidenced in the preamble of the so-called Expatriation Act of 1868. Under martial law, title is a mere fiction, since all property belongs to the military, except for that property which the Commander-in-Chief may, in his benevolence, exempt from taxation and seizure, and upon which he allows the enemy to reside. In proclaiming the first Trading with the Enemy Act by executive order, the illegitimate so-called President, Mr. Abraham Lincoln, an attorney, set in place the means by which the federal new agency military government could interact with all walks of life who were not 14th Amendment citizens, those non-registered voters per the 15 inches amendment of the altered status of resident alien. Such people could technically be designated as enemies. Are you beginning to understand how people not a party to the regime of necessity could be at odds with their condition appertaining to such military agency government of necessity? In a message to Congress on December 3, 1861, Mr. Abraham Lincoln, an attorney, answered the banker's argument that the beneficiary people of the posterity could not be trusted with their constitutional powers, the political and monetary system of free enterprise conceived by their founding fathers, by saying, "No men living are more worthy to be trusted than those who toil up from poverty, none less inclined to take or touch aught which they have not honestly earned. Let them beware of surrendering a political power which they already possess, and which, if surrendered, will surely be used to close the door of advancement against such as they, and to fix new disabilities and burdens upon them, till all of liberty shall be lost." In 1865, just before the close of the Civil War, the military dictator, and illegitimately known as the President, Mr. Abraham Lincoln declared his new monetary policy. The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credits needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. By the adoption of these principles, the taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest. Money will cease to be master and become the servant of humanity. The privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest opportunity. Had this been implemented, it would have ushered in a worldwide economic renewal. Unfortunately, a few weeks after its introduction, Mr. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated because he defied the bankers in proposing to print interest-free money to pay the war debt. Thus, the government continued to operate fully under the authority of private international law, dictated by the creditor. Since the commander-in-chief, Mr. Abraham Lincoln, was assassinated before he could complete plans for reinstating constitutional agency government in the southern states of the Union and end the martial rule by executive order, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution has further created a new citizenship, or status, for their expanded jurisdiction. Laws for the District of Columbia were proposed and passed by the military agency Congress in 1871, the District of Columbia being incorporated as a private foreign corporation by the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1871, and all member states of the Union were apparently reformed as franchisees or political subdivisions. See Diet v. Turner, 1968, 439 Pacific Reporters, 2-day series, 266, 267, and Utah v. Phillips, 1975, 540 Pacific Reporter, 2-day series, 936, 941, 942, of the corporation known as the United States, hence creating a new military social construct, formerly known as the Social Compact of the several states of the Union. What remained of the former agency government of the Republican form of the Social Compact was the private side under the rule of the bankers, solely for their absolute and express benefit. The first attempt by the Military Congress under the new military social construct to define citizenship was in 1866 in the passage of the Civil Rights Act, Revised Statute Section 1992, 8 United States Code Annotated Section 1. The Act provided that all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power are declared to be citizens of the United States. And this in turn was followed in 1868 by the adoption of the 14th Amendment, United States Code Annotated. Said article of amendment the 14th, declaring, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. At this period of time, the only people in the United States who were under the jurisdiction of the private bifurcated government of the assumed 10 miles square of Washington, D.C., were the government employees, those within the territories owned by the United States, and now the former slaves. The former citizens of the several southern states of the Union, now captured, became 14th Amendment United States citizens, the only remainder of people operating within the military social construct, or the alleged creditors, who could still invoke the power over agency government through the original jurisdiction of the Republican form of government, as established by the Social Compact of the United States Constitution, as the holders in due course of each and every private right, privilege, and immunity, if the need became necessary, concerning any possible attempt by the new military social construct to act arbitrarily in any way concerning the servicing of the alleged debt due. A new 13th Amendment was enacted December 18, 1865. The 14th Amendment was enacted July 28, 1868. Both amendments were illicitly ratified by non-elected representatives and senators under martial law in each and every military enforced southern state legislature, put into place by the U.S. military by direct order of the commander-in-chief through force over the conquered territory and under martial law. No such state could ever obtain its freedom from the new federal social military rule by ratifying these new amendments as misrepresented to the people by the federal system. They were told that the troops of aggression would be removed from such territories and cessation of hostilities would occur once these amendments were ratified. Any contract entered under threat, duress, or coercion is null and void. According to the rule of war, martial law. Once martial law is lifted, all laws, rules, regulations created or promulgated during the hostilities are null and void, and the parties return to the status quo before such hostilities broke out between the parties. But then, the Constitution was not even in effect following sine die and the proclamation of martial law. It is apparent that due to the fact that the national emergency has never been lifted or proclaimed to be over, that the so-called military social construct known as the United States is still in power under the rules of martial law by and through executive orders of the Commander-in-Chief, caused of necessity by sine die. The 14th Amendment brought the freed slaves, whose previous owners were private plantation landowners, and transferred those slaves under subjection of the new military social constructed government, the assumed 10-mile square jurisdiction of the City of Washington and/or District of Columbia, and it offered its protection to those who would choose to become its subjects in exchange for their freedom and/or sovereignty. The 14th Amendment is a good example of the give a little, take a lot strategy that is often used, a sugarcoating to a bitter pill. Sovereign people who had assumed themselves to be among the powers of earth had created a social compact, a government, to guarantee themselves their rights. They secured these rights under this social compact as birthrights for their posterity, citizens. In contrast, the federal government created 14th Amendment citizenship to guarantee its power over the former citizens by reducing them to the standing of its newly created citizens. It seems to be taking citizens under its protection, but at the price of servitude. Sovereigns may choose to become subjects, free men and women to become vassals. This amendment has always been controversial. Many people over the years have questioned the amount of power it vests in the federal government. Some have even questioned its validity. On one occasion, Judge Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court, as above referenced, remarked, "Cannot believe that any court in full possession of its faculties could honestly hold that the amendment was properly approved and adopted." State v. Phillips, Pacific Reporter, 2nd Series, Volume 540, page 941, 942, 1975. However, the most important fact about this amendment is that, although it created a new class of citizen, it did not have any effect on sovereign people. Both classes still exist. When the Constitution was adopted, the people of the United States were the citizens of the several states for whom and for whose posterity the government was established. Each of them was a citizen by birthright in the state of birth to which United States was created to protect from foreign powers at the adoption of the Constitution by the several states of the Union, and to make uniform such protection among the states. And all free people thereafter born within one of the several states became by birth citizens of the compact party state of the United States of America. But we know that this is not true from research in the law of contract. Anyone not signatory to the social compact or directly related as the posterity thereto is an alien to the compact and is only allowed to assume whatever right out of necessity to the compact to keep the peace until all power is vested in order to secure to the members such blessings unto themselves or their posterity as are necessary or opportunistic as the need may arise from time to time. To preserve their freedom, both classes of citizen no longer exist except by the need of necessity, as may or may not be claimed by any particular member of the current military social construct. It's your right of expatriation and repatriation to emerge into a social compact to which you become signatory to become a sovereign people. While it's a privilege to be a 14th Amendment citizen, and most importantly, it's up to you to determine which one you are or which one you choose to be. Just remember that you pay for a privilege, whereas a right carries no obligation. This is at the heart of your public declaration of independence to a candid world by and through such social compact created to recognize your sovereign birthright, to assume among the powers of earth, recognized by the laws of nature and nature's creator to which you are entitled, to emerge into the sovereign people you were created to be, and which are recognized and protected within the universal and/or international public order. The so-called president, Mr. Abraham Lincoln, apparently knew that his executive orders no longer had any force under contractual constitutional law. So he commissioned General Orders No. 100, April 24, 1863, apparently as a special code to govern his actions under martial law and to justify the seizure of power. This further extended the laws of the District of Columbia and also fictionally implemented the provisions of Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 17-18 of the defunct contract known as the Constitution, beyond the boundaries of Washington, D.C., and illegitimately into the several states no longer united under the central agency government of the United States. General Orders No. 100, also called the Lieber Instructions and the Lieber Code, have apparently extended the laws of war and private international law into the so-called several states of the Union. The defunct agency United States government assumed power and became the presumed military conqueror of all the people to which it could bend its will by misrepresentation over the land of the former several states of the Union. The U.S. participation in World War I exacerbated the national debt so that it became impossible for us to pay it off in 1929. Wasn't that a nice coincidence? It also enhanced the War Powers Act that the illegitimate president, Mr. Abraham Lincoln, by executive order, as Commander-in-Chief, put in place during his presidency. This War Powers Act was reinforced, and the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917 was passed to define, regulate, and punish those who were trading with enemies, and were then required by that act to be licensed by the government to do business, any business. This will become more important later on. During and after the Civil War, the original 13 inches amendment was replaced, and a new 13 circumflex amendment was issued first by executive order and then enacted under martial law on December 18, 1865. The 14 circumflex amendment was enacted similarly on July 28, 1868. The 15 circumflex amendment enacted similarly on March 30, 1870. President Lincoln, by executive order, proclaimed the first Trading with the Enemy Act. President Lincoln stated, "The government should create, issue, and circulate all currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers." Further, he quoted, "The privilege of creating and issuing money is not only the supreme prerogative of government, but it is the government's greatest opportunity." Afterwards, he was murdered because he defied the bankers by printing interest-free money to pay for the war efforts. The 14 inches amendment brought the freed slaves, whose previous owners were private plantation owners, and transferred those slaves under slavery of the government, the assumed 10 miles square jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. At any given period of time, the only people in the United States who were under the jurisdiction of the private bifurcated government of the assumed 10 miles square of Washington, D.C., were the government employees and those who created the social compact, and of course, those residing as resident and non-resident aliens within the territories owned by the United States and now the former slaves. The former citizens of those living in the southern portion of the social construct known as the United States for the United States of America, now captured, became 14 circumflex amendment citizens by martial law. Their only express and sole privilege was to vote as granted by the 15 inches amendment. The remainder of the compact party people of the posterity related thereto could still invoke the power over government through original jurisdiction of the Republic side of the Constitution only in limited application from any curtailed privilege and immunity effected pursuant thereto by way of the Act of July 27, 1868, C. 249, 81, 15 Stat. 223, Reverend Stat. Section 1999, now Title 8, USC $8,800, 801, Expatriation Act. Thus, the new form of democracy, MOB rule martial law, as the government was so styled, operated fully under the authority of private law dictated by the creditor, according to the principles of international public order.